Big Six.
Richard, my one big thing this week, a little bit of a lighter story, although somewhat of a serious development, which is the ongoing water situation in Arizona and the American West, which lassos, if you will, Saudi Arabia right into the drama. We talked in episode 70, Richard, about recent investments into Saudi Arabia's water sector domestically in the kingdom and addressing water security in Saudi Arabia's arid and water-stressed regions of the kingdom. We also recently hosted, we should do a little shout out and ask viewers and listeners if they haven't listened to it yet. We hosted Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Anazi, our old friend who does research on water in Saudi Arabia and recently co-won a prestigious international prize for water research from his time at the University of Cincinnati. Talked with him a little bit about water and his patents that he's received and some of the work he's done for his research. So we've talked about water a little bit, Richard, in Saudi Arabia. It's kind of an important thing because it ties heavily into agriculture and farming and the supply of food for their growing kingdom. So it's sort of a key thing. And obviously what many people know about Saudi Arabia, if they know one thing, is that it's a large desert and it's very dry. There isn't a lot of rain. There aren't a lot of rivers. So water is very precious there. So Saudi Arabia is sort of going through a water transition where they are, pursuing innovations in agriculture, central pivot agriculture. When you fly into Riyadh, Richard, as you recently did a couple of weeks ago, you can't miss it. There's these big green circles that you go in. It's really cool. But mostly what they have been doing is conserving water. And that has led Saudi Arabia to explore farming and agricultural opportunities abroad, both for wheat and imports of wheat from places like Ukraine and in Africa. And then in other things like alfalfa to feed cows, agricultural enterprises abroad, including the United States. So the largest agricultural company in Saudi Arabia, their version of Monsanto or whatever, I don't even know if it's Monsanto. I don't think it's Monsanto anymore, right? It's something else. Yeah, bad PR. There's a conglomerate called Almarai, which owns a subsidiary called Fondomonte. We discussed about, 3 or 4 months ago, Richard. That subsidiary is active in the U.S. state of Arizona and California, farming alfalfa. Just found itself once again as a nice big round button in a hot button issue in the American West, which is water. The twin-headed dragon of overuse and irresponsible usage of water over decades of American settlement in the West and climate change have presented local and national politicians with a series of really, truly unpalatable and difficult decisions and choices when it comes to water in the American West. In Arizona, you have the Colorado River forming the western boundary of the state and some smaller rivers. And then you have this massive amount, was massive and dwindling amount now of groundwater underneath the surface. I should add here, making it all worse for everyone, is that in each state, though they share rivers, each has its own water usage rules and laws, with the federal government enforcing the Clean Water Act of 1972. It's just a big, complicated legal mess. And the idea in general at the beginning was come out here and farm, use any water you want because we want to settle this area. So you have this very difficult problem now, which is a dwindling amount of water for people to use. And you have these big agricultural companies in California and Arizona and other Western states using a lot of the water. One thing that is very helpful for politicians facing this issue is a absolutely totally convenient scapegoat. Enter Almarai and Fondomonte, owned by Saudi Arabia, and Arizona's Attorney General, Kris Mayes. This modern saga really begins in 2015 with the Arizona State Land Department, which allowed Fondomonte to lease desert farmland west of Phoenix at 1/6 of its market value and pump groundwater from Phoenix water reserves. That was Fondomonte, of course. Fondomonte had permitting applications into the state for drilling 2 new wells, but those were this week denied ceremoniously by the state's attorney general, Kris Mayes, who used the opportunity to make an example of Saudi Arabia's farms in Arizona and the need for water to be used by locals instead of international farming conglomerates. Makes sense. The permits were denied after Hayes raised objections about some of the paperwork, discrepancies about ownership, and whether the wells were new or replacements. It's fairly legitimate. You probably have to have that stuff straight when you submit it and you are proposing to pump hundreds of thousands or millions of gallons of groundwater. But she then took the opportunity to make this very political hot button issue and said, quote, "It's outrageous and frankly unacceptable that the state would even consider granting new wells to allow the Saudis to pump millions of gallons of water to grow more alfalfa for their cows." She said, noting the vast amount of water that could come from those new wells, quote, "In one day, the amount of water pumping out of just one of those wells could serve roughly 30,000 Arizona residents, which is pretty astonishing given that the entire population of La Paz County has just over 16,000 people." This is water, she said, that belongs to the people of Arizona. It needs to stay in the ground in La Paz County. So, I mean, so right now what you have is sort of in the American public and especially in the West, you have this idea or a concept that there is a dwindling amount of water in the ground, and that one of the companies that is taking it is a Saudi company that is using it to farm alfalfa to feed its cows to make milk in Saudi Arabia. So you sort of can see how this is very easy for people to say this is no good. So looking into it just a little bit more, Richard, because we have discussed this before, and it's a little bit of the classic issue for Saudi Arabia here, where you just get caught up in some sort of firestorm. But Almarai, which is valued at $14.3 billion, owns 10,000 acres of farmland in Arizona under the subsidiary Fondomonte. It is the biggest player in the Middle East dairy supply. It also owns 3,500 acres in Southern California, which also uses the Colorado River that divides the two states. So this issue, of course, Richard, as you know, isn't just this one farm or this one company. And there have been reports in CNN and other places about another company from the UAE named Al Dahra doing the same thing, also in Arizona. The issue, of course, is years, decades of lax water usage rights, both at the state and federal level, as America rushed to settle the West. Just to give you one example, in Arizona, 80% of the state has no laws overseeing how much water corporate mega farms are using, nor is there any way for the state to track it, which is amazing. I mean, it's kind of amazing. And then compounding everything, of course, is climate change, varying weather patterns, providing drier riverbeds and unpredictability when it comes to farming. The Colorado River, of course, does not begin in Arizona. It begins north of Arizona. So another state is also drawing on that supply. So yeah, this, Richard, when we do our daily newsletter, which is just fantastic, you know, you see themes kind of come and go. This one came a few months ago and went, and we talked about it on the program, and then came up again because this Arizona Attorney General was like, well, I'm going to make a big public example about the denial of these permits. And you just can kind of understand how the layperson might say, well, this is, you know, open and shut. The Saudis are in here pumping water, growing alfalfa in the desert, and then feeding it to cows in the Middle East. And, you know, what does Arizona have to show for it? So yeah, this is a very interesting story. I'm glad we could sort of bring it up again. Just wanted to add one more thing here. We included this last time, but Natalie Koch, who is a geographer, did a great interview with HCN.org about why Saudi farmers are pumping Arizona groundwater, and sort of gave some context. It was really interesting. And the history there goes way back to the 1940s or 50s on that relationship, and actually the import of camels into Arizona as well from the Middle East, which is, it's a cool interview. I don't want to take too much time on it, but yeah, just worth noting. But yeah, anyway, so Fondomonte and Almarai are right in the crosshairs right now of a very tough political conversation in the American West.
Yeah, wrong place at the wrong time. That was a good one.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was a little long-winded.
No,
it's fascinating.
It's so much fun to, you know, when you can refer to earlier episodes or segments and stuff. And we did that. Interestingly enough, there were a couple of connections between your one big thing and my one big thing. One, food security, which is a big issue in Saudi Arabia.
Good point.
They've invested, I think in 2021, they went in with the Emiratis on a $3 billion essentially agriculture fund in Sudan, you know, to grow and to promote food production, not only for domestic purposes, but also for export. Again, you know, this is a policy that Saudi Arabia has. You know, it doesn't have a lot of homegrown fertile land. You know, farming abroad and agreements with governments and municipalities and states is, you know, been part of their modus operandi for a while. The other way it's connected, it's a PRs. You know, the unfortunate circumstance in Sudan has given Saudi Arabia to have a nice PR bounce. They're completely, you know, what's going on in Arizona, as you really well outlined, you know, Saudi Arabia's collateral damage here. the water issue and the problems in Arizona are entirely homegrown. And you mentioned that 80% of the state doesn't have any water law, and the law of the land in that 80% is those with the deepest wells win. So it's a constant ongoing contest to get the deepest well, dig the deepest well. And this is, for the most part, historically has been very much supported by farmers. This is the Wild West, of course, and they tend to skew highly conservative and personal rights and that sort of thing. And they don't want anybody constraining, regulating, or interfering at all with their right to do what they want to do. If it means digging a well, not digging a well, they don't want the government involved. And the end result is this, everybody's suffering. And it's interesting because I guess in reading some of this, Lucien, there's there are groups now, they're actually counties, constituencies that are coming together, individual farmers, and saying, look, we need to set up some sort of management authority because we're going to get wiped out in this. Everyone, just looking after their own doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So obviously water politics in Arizona are very fraught. Like you say, Saudi Arabia is an easy stalking horse. So where they fell on a nice PR side on the Sudan, they fell on the wrong PR side in Arizona.
Yeah. Great point. Really great point on that. And the Sudan farming thing is I mean, we didn't plan that tie-in, but that's an amazing tie-in.
Well, and I mean, I think you drew this out. I don't think you need any more details from me, but for perspective, because you were giving perspective to this. I mean, they're in the Butler, the Fondomonte, 3,500 acres, I guess, is in the Butler Valley, which is west of Phoenix. I mean, that 35 acres is 2% of the basin, that valley. And almost most of Arizona's alfalfa production goes to local dairies. And in fact, the destination that is most exported to in alfalfa is not Saudi Arabia, it's China. So again, like you very well drew out, and you drew us a picture, Saudi Arabia was in the wrong place at the wrong place,
the wrong time, right? And then you kind of get to look at how this is a very like a sausage being made part of American politics, where you just see how one politician or an attorney general, somebody just says, "Ooh, wow, this is a really easy way to score votes by creating an enemy, making it Saudi Arabia, and then saying, hey, they're taking," it just makes it easy to understand. Richard, this is a perfect case, and we don't need to go too long on this, but this is a perfect case for the federal government to come in, wrangle all the states together and say, look, like, if you guys aren't all cooperating here, then this all goes away. And the 1972 Clean Water Act sort of does some of that, but I mean, there needs to be more of that. There shouldn't be these states sort of operating on their own. Otherwise, this is never going to work out. But yeah, very complicated issue as well.
Yeah, and that's the problem here. Large swaths of that area don't want anything to do with the federal government interfering with local or state issues.
Yeah.
So if they can't work it out on their own, we'll see what happens.
Some dry swimming pools and
and people going out of business. Rugged individuality is great, right up to right up to the point where you go out of business.
Right.
Anyway, right. So that's that's a particular bag of mine. Hopefully they can get it together and police themselves and find some sort of reasonable solution to all this.
Yeah.